So a couple months ago, Felt sent me their new 2020 FR road bike on account of my aging F1 finally being retired to backup duty. This wasn't a paid sponsorship, and there were no strings attached. In fact, they didn't even ask me for this review. They just have trust in their product and wanted me to get on one of their new bikes. So now that I've ridden it for a couple months, how does it stack up? Stay tuned to find out. First, let's quickly go through my build. Other than the crankset, the drivetrain is all Ultegra Di2. It's got an 11 to 28 tooth cassette with 53 39 tooth chainrings, pretty standard. I swapped out the Ultegra crankset for my Power 2 Max power meter, which is built on 172.5 millimeter carbon K-Force light cranks and a worn big chainring that I have since replaced by this old school Dura-Ace one. The bike came stock with these Reynolds AR41 carbon clinchers wrapped with 25mm Vittoria Rubino Pro tires, which I've already flatted on like 4 times. I'll talk more about that later. The rims are 41 millimeters deep, tubeless ready, and there's plenty of frame clearance in case you want to go for even bigger tires. Stock 42 centimeter carbon bars with the shallow drop that I like, so I decided to keep them. And it's got this nifty Di2 junction box in the handlebar, which allows for a real clean and tidy front end. The Ultegra Di2 shifters and hydraulic brake levers that I like to angle in a little bit. And I was surprised, the newest Ultegra hydraulic shifters are almost indistinguishable from the non-hydraulic ones, which is great because the ergonomics are fantastic. It's got disc brakes, 160mm rotor in the front, 140mm rotor in the back, no surprises there. I did swap out the stem for a longer 122mm Ritchie I had and slammed it because it looks pro, and so I could stay nice and low at the front end. It's got a stock carbon seat post, and I decided to keep the Prologo saddle that it came with. You know, sometimes I love it, other times it's not so great. I kind of have a love-hate relationship with this saddle. I'll talk a little bit more about that later. So that about wraps up the build. How's the ride quality? Well, I'm going to compare it with the bikes that I currently ride on a regular basis, which includes my previous race bike, 2016 Felt F1, and my commuter and rain bike, which was showcased in my last video, actually. It's a 2014 BH Ultralight. So in terms of stiffness, both Felts are noticeably stiffer than the BH, which is more geared towards being an ultralight climbing bike, hence the name. It's pretty hard to call a winner between the Felts for stiffness, but the newer one is definitely more compliant in the up-down direction, which makes it just much more comfortable, but just as responsive, so I'll give the win to the new Felt. Alright, aerodynamics. Well, this one's pretty easy. According to what the manufacturers claim, the new Felt is clearly faster than the other 2 bikes. Does that mean you can't win a bike race on the other bikes? No. But having lost a handful of races this year, by just a few inches, I can speak from personal experience and say I'd like every advantage I can get. Alright, and lastly, weight. Despite the beefier, more aero tube sections and disc brake mounts on the new FR frame, it has a lighter claimed weight than my older F1 race bike, and it's even lighter than the dedicated climbing bike from BH, so pretty impressive. Alright, let's wrap it up. The things I liked: it's lighter, it's more aero, but it retains that stiff and responsive feel. The disc brakes undeniably give better braking performance, and unlike rim brakes, you can ride a nice set of carbon wheels with disc brakes, so you don't have to worry about putting miles on the braking track. The tire clearance on this new bike is great, coming from my older F1, which couldn't even accommodate 25mm tires in the front. I get to ride up to 28s on this new bike, which is great for increased comfort and grip, and not so many pinch flats. Alright, and the last thing, this is pretty personal, but the geometry of Felt bikes in general just fits me really well. Looks like Felt hasn't changed that with their new FR series bikes. Plus, I just like their classic aesthetic. I think the design is really pleasing. And the things I didn't like, the Rubino Pro tires it came with, while they feel pretty grippy and I'm sure they're high performance, that seems to come at a pretty high cost. And maybe it's just because I've been incredibly unlucky these last few weeks, but I suspect these tires have terrible puncture resistance. I have Bontrager's newest 26mm performance tubeless tire sitting in a box that I bought shortly after getting this bike that I'm going to install next chance I get. And then we come to the saddle. So quick disclaimer, saddles are like extremely personal choices. This is just my point of view, take it with a grain of salt. But when I first bought this bike, I really enjoyed the saddle, actually. And I still do for climbing and just for kind of cruising around. And without getting into too much detail here, the problem is when you get into an aero position. Let's just say the nose of the saddle is pretty uncomfortable in a place where you don't want discomfort. I've tried moving it around a bit, but in terms of locking in that aero criterion position, I just don't think anything can beat the ISM. Alright, so bottom line. This bike just does everything well. Gravel, dirt, climbing, sprinting. So far, it's been just a pleasure to ride with everything I've thrown at it. It's not the lightest. It's probably not the stiffest or most aero bike out there, but if I was forced to have only one bike, life wouldn't be as good. But it would be this felt. Definitely on the hydraulic, electronic shifting bandwagon. So, if you have any more questions, comment below. And as always, if you like this, guys, don't forget to like and subscribe. Catch you the next one. Thanks.